In a tense Psylocke. During the follow-up to the original Contest of Champions story, a seemingly peaceful group of aliens invited the heroes to battle each other and showcase their abilities, with the reward being new tech for all of Earth. In reality though, this was the plan all by the Brood to drain the powers of Earth's greatest champions and then pump them into Rogue, who at the time was carrying the Brood's queen's consciousness. In this competition though, Iron Man was put up against Psylocke. Luckily, Iron Man had built some dampeners into his suit in an effort to limit psychic attacks. However, Psylocke was still able to create the illusion that she was Lady Mandarin once more, and she got the upper hand on Tony for a hot minute before eating it and then getting destroyed by the gold titanium alloy man. And at 9, Falcon. Falcon is an excellent flyer, and in Captain America's third MCU title movie, he is shown as quite the pro pilot, dodging and being able to keep pace with both Iron Man and War Machine, even breaking away a few times, once with the aid of Hawkeye and Ant-Man. However, when the chips are down and we're on the ground, Iron Man certainly has the upper hand, as he demonstrated in the brief moments when Falcon dodged Vision's beam and caused it to hit Rhodey's arc reactor, causing him to plummet hundreds of feet and screw up his legs. And you know, since they're still the good guys, Falcon goes up to check on Rhodey and see if he's okay, but Tony blasts him and knocks him to the ground with one single blast. I have to be honest, it counts, but it's still funny as hell. I love that scene. And at 8, Brother Voodoo. Jericho returned to his native Port-au-Prince, Haiti after 12 years of education and practice in the United States. His brother Daniel though was dying from the spell of a rival Bokor who claimed he served the evil serpent god Damballa. After only a few weeks, Jericho had reached a proficiency in voodoo even greater than his brothers though. To further increase his power, Papa Jambo performed a rite that summoned Daniel Drum's spirit back from the dead and joined it with Jericho's own. And in the Axis storyline, Brother Voodoo used this power to possess Scarlet Witch, who Iron Man then had to fight off. Brother Voodoo, possessing Wanda along with a good Doctor Doom and Red Skull, worked to reverse the spell that caused Axis, but Iron Man escaped its effects by throwing up a last-minute telepathic shield, protecting himself from its reversal. I think that it's weird, like having a good version of Doctor Doom, though. I mean, Doom is literally in his name, but okay. Iron Man still technically won then. Just saying.
Coming in at number 7, we have the Steel Corpse. Hailing from Earth 11326, this version of Iron Man was pretty similar to our own, but with 2 key differences. He's permanently fused with his suit, and he absolutely hates mutants. Fighting alongside other villainous Avengers to wipe out this universe's X-Men, this Iron Man's natural body died long ago after being melded with his machinery, and thus he jokingly calls himself the Steel Corpse as a way of coping with his morbid situation. This version of Iron Man had complete mastery of his weaponry, as they were literally a part of his body, and only a last-second change of heart before sacrificing himself stops this Tony Stark from being one of the absolute worst.
And at 6, Iron Man. In the Avengers crossover known as The Crossing, Iron Man beat himself. Yeah, that's not even the crazy part though. The big hook in this storyline is that many years ago, Kang came back in time and basically brainwashed Tony Stark in the early days of the Avengers. You might ask, what? And then you might ask again, seriously, bro, are you serious? And then another question of, if Tony Stark had been under Kang's control for all these years, why didn't Kang use Tony to help him any of the times that the Avengers actually had beaten Kang? And the answer to that is, of course, we have no idea. And then there was another bad idea that was thrown into the mix. The notion that Kang only turned to Tony after Hank Pym didn't actually fall for his mental tricks, which is why Hank has mental problems. Yeah, until one faithful team member had the genius idea to go back in time to get Tony Stark before Kang had brainwashed him, and then have that Tony fight against the older Tony. Tony actually ends up nearly killing his younger self, but hey, Iron Man won against Iron Man. Even if it was inevitable that an Iron Man would win, it's good enough for this list, damn it.
At number 5, we've got the time Iron Man shields up right as the Hulk is about to hit him with a huge missile. It seems that at this point in the storyline, the Hulk feels that he's been betrayed by Iron Man, so he's very angry, as usual, and decides to abandon reason and use force instead, as usual. What's brutal about this event isn't just that the Hulk is basically one-shotted by the explosion, but also that Iron Man first rubs it in by schooling the Hulk on the make and design of the missile. He identifies it as his own technology technology and notices leakage that threatens an explosion that would send them both to Mars and back. So he activates a super powerful shield which protects him from the blast. And those visuals are just ridiculous, seeing the Hulk getting vaporized by the explosion as Iron Man's safe and sound in his little bubble. Not what the Hulk was expecting. Maybe it's time for that dude to start thinking before he acts, especially when he's in the presence of one of the best.
And at 4, the Winter Soldier. Tony isn't able to get the upper hand on the Winter Soldier until he's sufficiently filled with rage of personal loss. And I mean, aren't we all? Rage is the fuel that makes the world go round. Which we actually see play out in the same movie as the fight with Falcon. After Tony learned that Bucky was actually the one responsible for his parents' car crash. I mean, I can see both sides of the coin here. Like, yeah, Bucky at the time was being controlled by Hydra, so it wasn't really him who did it, just his meat suit. But on the other hand, I wouldn't care. He killed my mommy. So yeah, I get why he went nuts. And I always find it funny that somehow Bucky always seems to end up losing his arm, at least his metal one, in some way or another. To be fair though, I don't think Tony would have blown off his arm if it wasn't metal. But like, imagine Bucky was faking having the whole metal arm thing the whole time. And it was just like a cool sleeve that he had that was hiding his real arm, and then Tony blew it off. It was like, ah! That'd be funny. I want to see that what if story. I know it would be absolutely horrific animation wise, but come on, please make it happen. Also, I'm pretty sure that they had the Disney Plus series for What If planned before Stan Lee's passing, and that they were going to reveal him as the Watcher, but couldn't, which is sad. I wish that had happened.
Coming in at number 3, we have Obadiah Stane, aka the Iron Monger in the very first Iron Man film. It's become a bit of a meme at this point that many of the supervillains of the MCU are dark reflections of the same powers and personalities as the heroes they're opposing, and the Iron Monger is the origin of that trope in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Completely guilt-free about selling weapons to all sides, Stane is a ruthless businessman willing to do anything to maintain control of Stark Industries, and shows just how awful Tony's new technology could be used in the wrong hands, and what a monster he could become if he gave up on his deepest morals. Although, honestly, the fact that his idea of upgrading the Iron Man suit is just to make the original one bigger, maybe he's not quite as smart as Tony after all.
Penultimately, in at number 2, Hulk. Thanks to the versatility of Tony's suits and some help from Bruce Banner himself, Iron Man was able to take on the Hulk when Scarlet Witch sent him rampaging across South Africa in Avengers Age of Ultron, calling down Veronica, which I feel like should be a reference to the Archie comics, but I could be very wrong. The suit proved to be everything we could have hoped for as it went shot for shot with Hulk. The best scene from this fight though is when he grabs Hulk's hand and then like traps it and then just jackhammers the other fist into Hulk's face. Oh, I love that. However, this isn't the only time they fought. They also fought in Iron Man number 132 in 1980, when Hulk punched Tony into a semi-truck, tried ripping his suit open underwater while Iron Man was trying to drown him, which I feel like might have been a bit extreme there, Tony. And even ripped off a chunk of the St. Louis Arch to use as a projectile. In the end though, it took Tony loading an insane amount of energy into his armor to deliver the final blow, taking the big green meanie down. After that though, Hulk turned into Banner and then Tony's suit busted, literally falling to the ground around him. Finally, in at number 1, Sentry. Iron Man's fight with Sentry from Siege number 4 in 2010 is one of those he was being controlled by an evil thing tropes, where technically Sentry was the Void at the time, and the Void may technically be a separate entity of purely negative energy, but it often manifests inside Sentry's body and in essence has the same abilities, so it's like Tony beat Sentry. This isn't a list of heroes that Tony fought while they were on the good side, okay? It's a list of the most powerful heroes that Tony has beat, even if they weren't heroes at the time. It's good enough. During the events of Siege, Void served Norman Osborne as part of his Dark Avengers, raining destruction down on Earth and Asgard, which is definitely an issue for the world, because you know, Earth. While Thor may have been the one to deal the killing blow, though Tony was the one who had weakened Void into a state where he could be killed. So, good on you, Tony. You took down basically a god and lived. Pretty impressive if you ask me. Especially because, like, didn't Sentry, like, tear Ares in half or something nuts like that? I remember talking about that. I feel like that was Sentry. I think Sentry tore the Marvel version of Ares in half. Or was that another person? I can't remember.
At number 10, it is the time when Iron Man almost kills a non-Cyttorak powered Juggernaut. In this exchange, Juggernaut is on a tear, and Thor, Ghost, Luke Cage, and Iron Man appear to try and put a stop to him. Iron Man warns Juggernaut with total confidence to stand down because the numbers are against him. Juggernaut then basically hits L2 and activates his taunt saying, "Then it's almost even." Should not have said that. So instead of humoring any more of this back and forth, Iron Man promptly follows through with his threat and blasts Juggernaut, almost killing it. The blast he hits him with is a sonic beam that he's used before to put down a whole regiment. The attack injures Juggernaut so badly that he's basically like steaming and bleeding from every orifice on his face. It's so bad that Luke Cage has to stop Iron Man before he kills the Juggernaut there and then. And it's pretty clear that Juggernaut had no idea that Iron Man would dominate the battle this much. And it becomes one of the many moments where Iron Man is able to come through and show everyone that he's not only one of the most powerful in the room, but that he's also willing to follow through. Okay, at number 9, we have the time when Iron Man is called to free hostages from an enclosure made of adamantium and vibranium, two of the strongest materials in the known universe. Remember, adamantium is the metal that reinforces Wolverine's skeleton and what his claws are made of, and vibranium is what Black Panther's weapons are made of, which can absorb and amplify sonic energy. So when Cardiac traps his hostages in a massive enclosure made of these materials, he clearly doesn't believe that there's any chance anyone could thwart his plans. But when Iron Man arrives on scene, he promptly backs himself up and basically turns his body into a human missile, rocketing towards the enclosure and busting a huge hole in it with his fist. This allows oxygen to enter the chamber, giving the team much more time to eventually save the hostages entirely. He does break his arm and a few ribs, but once again, he takes a villain's confidence and absolutely shatters it with his supreme power and iron will. At number 8, we have an event that is counted widely as one of Iron Man's most powerful feats. Mandarin and Iron Man find themselves facing off against a common enemy, an army of dragons led by Fin Fang Foom and Chen Su. And the dragons seem to be winning. After some pretty close calls, Iron Man and Mandarin seem to be at a stalemate, realizing that the dragons are just not letting up. At this very moment, Chen Su morphs back into dragon form and makes a final appeal to Mandarin for the rings, citing their power and how he is ill-equipped to control them himself. Iron Man realizes that this may be true, but that he is much more than a man, so he could himself unleash the true power of the rings, and he does. He grabs Mandarin's hands and unleashes an enormous explosion that levels a few mountain ranges as well as Fin Fang Foom and Chen Su in one go. This is another moment where a major enemy underestimates Iron Man's superhuman abilities and pays the price for it.
And at 7, Magneto. Yes, at the time of the battle of Iron Man and Magneto, Magneto was on the up and up, and as far as I'm aware, currently is. During Avengers vs. X-Men number 2 from 2012, the Avengers engaged the X-Men on their island home Utopia to get their hands on Hope and stop the coming threat of the Phoenix. This issue, among other interwoven ones, showed various Avengers facing off against mutants like Cyclops and Emma Frost, and Magneto and Iron Man going toe-to-toe. Which seems to be absolutely easy cheese given Magneto's control over metal, but Tony knew about this and had a suit composed of carbon fiber tubes, as well as studying magnetism in his free time, because why not? So in a moment of distraction when Magneto realized what the Phoenix would actually bring power-wise, Tony managed to land a final blow and knock him from the sky. I mean, sure, Magneto had a moment of distraction that allowed Tony to win, but half of the fight is staying mentally in the fight. You fight with your skill and your mind, and Magneto dropped it.
At number 6 is the time when Iron Man unhinges a plan set by the Raxon Corporation when they detonate a deposit of vibranium to try and destroy a fleet of battleships. Basically, going back, it starts with a battle between Iron Man and Namor, which is interrupted by the realization that Raxon is trying to gain control of a whole island due to a deposit of the highly valuable metal vibranium mentioned earlier. When a group of battleships close in to prevent this from taking place, the corrupt corporation decides to detonate the vibranium so that no one can have it. And it seems to be part of the plan to destroy these battleships in the process. But what does Iron Man do? He decides he wants to control the narrative and physically tows the 5 battleships away from the explosion. This makes it so Raxon just destroys the vibranium for no reason. And Iron Man does this with one of his old armors too. He can't help but show everyone that he has the strength to change everyone's plan at any given time and leave them in the dust wondering what happened.
Coming in at number 5, we have the Iron Maniac. On the dark alternate world of Earth 5012, most of the superheroes of this reality are dead after an unknown fatal error made by Reed Richards. A vengeful and violent Tony Stark makes it his life's mission to get revenge on Reed and modifies his armor to resemble that of Reed's worst enemy, Doctor Doom. This insane version of Iron Man killed the Human Torch and was eventually banished to the main Marvel universe, where he had to be subdued by the combined efforts of Spider-Man, Captain America, and Black Widow, who found it a bit unnerving to be fighting such a far-gone version of one of their closest allies. This Tony was just as resourceful as the real one, however, as he'd even escape custody by building a new suit from the remains of a life model decoy. Pretty resourceful for an insane Iron Man.
Okay, at number 4 is the time when Iron Man fractures the Phoenix Force with his Phoenix Buster armor. Now, I'm not sure if the Phoenix Force can physically feel anything, let alone embarrassment, considering it's a cosmic entity powerful enough to shatter whole worlds like glass, but if it could, its face would be red and hot after Iron Man absolutely wrecks Phoenix Force, forcing it to split up into 5 pieces. And the Phoenix Force isn't the only one who should be feeling the burn from this huge win by Iron Man. Thor even fails to take down Phoenix Force with his hammer right before Tony succeeds at it. So Iron Man is just showing everyone up in this event. And this is a huge event that had been building up for a while. Phoenix Force had been posing a huge threat to the X-Men and the Avengers in this storyline. So Iron Man just showing up and blowing it up into a bunch of pieces is pretty humiliating for such a powerful being. I just like to picture Phoenix Force getting all geared up about taking out all these superheroes and then their plans having to change entirely after a little human in his own little armor appears to stop them in their tracks. It's just, yikes, wrecked.
Getting close to the end, and in number 3, Spider-Man. Iron Man and Spider-Man have fought almost as much as they've teamed up, with Civil War being one of the multiple times they did both. While Peter and Tony's connection during the 2005 run of New Avengers initially saw Spidey joining Team Iron Man in the conflict, which actually ended up resulting in Peter unmasking himself on live television, then coming to regret it and having some horrible future comic storylines. The wall crawler changes his tune once he learns about Tony's secret prison in the negative zone, the moral implications of which makes Peter switch sides, because, you know, he was imprisoning heroes who disagree with superhero registration in a different freaking yeah. Peter wins the first round despite Tony threatening to kill Aunt May and Mary Jane, but when the two meet at Yankee Stadium later on, Spider-Man gets absolutely pummeled. But don't worry, Spider-Man gives as good as he gets in other issues. Go watch the top 10 most powerful superheroes who lost to Spider-Man if you want more info on that. That's right, I'm telling you to go watch another video. But after this one, of course, you're only 2 numbers away. You only got 2 more to go. Stay.
Okay, nearing the top of our list at number 2, we have the iconic face-off between Iron Man and Captain America. During the Civil War conflict, the Avengers are split into 2 different factions, one side being led by Captain America, the other by Iron Man. And as tensions escalate on either side, it finally culminates to a big battle between the 2 sides, and of course between Iron Man and Captain America themselves. But like everyone else on this list, Captain America somehow underestimates Tony Stark when he tries to pull a fast one on him and disable his armor. After what seems like a conciliatory handshake between Iron Man and Captain America, Tony notices a small electron scrambler device on his hand, leaving him open to a blow by Cap's shield right to the face. But as Iron Man is laying on the ground, petrified, he simply reboots his armor and gets back up. I don't think Captain America expects this either, because Iron Man flies at him and after an effortless fist fight, knocks him to the ground, almost severing his jaw with one massive punch in the face. This is high up on the list because Captain America is a very skilled strategist, and watching him get shown up so hard like this has to be pretty humiliating, especially in front of all his peers like that. Oof. At number 1, it is the face-off that Iron Man has against Magneto during the Avengers vs. X-Men storyline. This event takes the top of the list because of the irony. Get it? Iron-y? The irony of this particular face-off, given that Magneto manipulates metal and Iron Man is made of it. Fans had been anticipating this face-off for some time, so when it came, everyone expected Magneto to take the W. And that includes Magneto himself. But in classic ingenious Iron Man fashion, Tony Stark shows up to the fight with a special non-metal armor made out of nanotubes, stealing this huge advantage from Magneto. But that's not where it ends. Iron Man then harnesses the power of Jupiter's magnetic field to power up his armor and take down the magnetic supervillain. And while Magneto is coming back for one final attempt, he's distracted by Phoenix Force, giving Iron Man the chance to knock him out properly this time. This is a huge embarrassment for Magneto since he's the obvious choice for this battle. It might take some time to recover from that one, and I'm not just talking about his physical wounds.
Coming in at number 10, we have the Iron Goblin. Coming from an alternate universe where the Spider Island event wound up being permanent, Tony Stark was initially transformed into a human-spider hybrid under the control of the villainous Spider-Queen. During a battle with the Resistance, however, Tony was sprayed with the same goblin formula that had corrupted the mind of Norman Osborn, transforming Tony Stark into the Iron Goblin, with a mechanical new costume to match. And while this version of Tony would eventually decide to sacrifice himself in a last moment of humanity before his goblin insanity fully took over, the combination of Iron Man and Green Goblin tech is still a pretty terrifying combo that Spider-Man should hope never reappears. Coming in at number 9, we have the corrupted Iron Man from the controversial 90s event, The Crossing. When a variant of the time-traveling villain Kang the Conqueror, known as Immortus, began using the neural link in the Iron Man suit to secretly begin altering Tony Stark's brainwaves, Iron Man became a sleeper agent within the Avengers and eventually attacked his companions outright after secretly manipulating them for years. While eventually defeated by a time-traveling 19-year-old version of himself, and then retconned into Tony going back to his usual status quo in the Marvel Universe, this controversial storyline shows what would happen if Iron Man truly turned out to be a traitor. Coming in at number 8, we have Iron Thor. During the event that saw God Emperor Doom in control of a Marvel universe converted into a new Battleworld, Doom maintained his complete control over the many realms of Battleworld with a police force army known as the Thor Corps. One of the most powerful of Doom's personal army was the being known as Iron Thor, wearing a combination of the Iron Man armor and Thor's iconic helmet, and investigating any potential rebellions to his master Doom's rule. Even capable of wielding Mjolnir, this super powerful character still managed to be murdered by the hero Warrior Woman as an example of rebellion against Emperor Doom. He might have had a short life, but man, I really love that Iron Thor design.
At number 7, we have the time when Iron Man escapes the black hole created when Godkiller self-destructs. What's embarrassing about this event is that Godkiller's intentions are to take Iron Man with it in the blast created by its own self-destruction, and it's very sure that it'll accomplish this task considering Iron Man is aboard it. Godkiller is basically a giant suit of armor and Iron Man is in it. That's strangely hard to explain, but I think you know what I mean. And I don't blame Godkiller for having high expectations for this final feat, considering the black hole it ends up creating is the size of Earth, meaning that it would have 24 times the mass of the sun. So that means that the only thing Godkiller miscalculates, much like everyone else on this list, is Iron Man's strength, speed, and durability. And yeah, Iron Man comes flying out of the black hole, escaping the close call with his life completely intact. And that means that Godkiller obliterates himself basically for nothing, allowing Iron Man to escape to safety, despite the pull of 24 suns on his back. Godkiller gets absolutely owned here, but at least he's not alone. He's got the other 9 villains on this list to talk it out with.
Coming in at number 6, we have the infamous Iron Patriot, aka Norman Osborn. Best known as being the alter ego of Spider-Man's nemesis, the Green Goblin, Norman Osborn has long been one of the biggest threats in the Marvel Universe, manipulating events from afar as the CEO of Oscorp. Following the invasion of Earth by the Skrull army, Norman found himself suddenly in the public eye and with goodwill after being the one to personally defeat the Skrull Queen. Norman would use this influence to lead the Dark Avengers as the Iron Patriot, a twisted version of Iron Man combined with Captain America's patriotism that tricked the public into trusting Norman, and showing that Tony Stark is definitely not the worst billionaire in the Marvel world.
Halfway through into number 5, Daredevil. In the aftermath of the Axis storyline I mentioned earlier, Tony remains swamped and starts using his tech for even more personal gain than before. Yeah, he's not evil exactly, but he's certainly not above getting all of San Francisco addicted to his new gene rewriting extremist app. Daredevil, who recently relocated to the city after being barred from practicing law in New York, doesn't like this for some reason, almost as if he has a conscience. But when he first confronts Tony in his new island mansion, the armored Avenger just tosses Matt Murdock into the ocean. Just flings him right out the window. They have another fight later on that is an actual fight, but Tony ends up winning yet again. 2 issues later though, Tony actually ends up saving Daredevil from falling off a building, but then traps him in armor and wipes his memory of all the bad things that he's discovered about Tony, so I don't think he did for Matt's sake.
Coming in at number 4, we have the Superior Iron Man. During an event known as Axis, many Marvel heroes and villains had their morality completely inverted, with good guys becoming bad, bad guys becoming good, and so on and so forth. One of the few changes that wasn't reversed by the end of the event, however, was the morality of Iron Man, who in his evil form still possessed all of the intelligence and dark aspects of Tony's personality, and managed to build a shield for himself to prevent being turned into a hero again. Infecting much of the planet with a new version of the Extremis virus, and using artificially intelligent drones to assert his dominance, this version of Tony was only finally cured by the Marvel Universe's collapse into Battleworld resetting his morals, meaning that this was a villain that the rest of the Avengers didn't even manage to properly defeat.
Which brings us to number 3, when Iron Man totally humiliates this fleet of guys wearing power suits that they think could combat his own. With their suits having the same firepower as some small countries, they expect there's no way Tony Stark could match up against them. In fact, Tony is even wearing his classic armor, which isn't quite as powerful as his updated suit, so they even have a better chance than usual to even the score. And still, they're made to look like fools, as Iron Man easily evades their heat-seeking missiles and diverts them to actually backfire and destroy the armored assailants themselves. It's just an absolute joke watching him face off against these guys, carrying them around like they're action figures and throwing insults at them, and they seem so confident. That's what kills me about this list, is how confident all these villains are before Iron Man shows them who's boss. It just makes the wins all more embarrassing when they come.
Coming in at number 2, we have the evil Emperor Stark. Hailing from the destroyed world of Earth 42777, this version of Iron Man was perhaps the cruelest the multiverse had ever seen, as he manipulated Magneto and the Brotherhood of Mutants into declaring war on humanity, then used the resulting anti-mutant backlash to secure power as the world's only superhero. Holding entire countries hostage with natural disasters and even spreading plagues among his own citizens, this version of Tony declared himself Emperor Stark, taking the cloak of Dr. Doom as a final trophy. This was Iron Man at his most evil, and he was an incredibly powerful threat when encountered by the multiverse-traveling Exiles, only eventually defeated by his own universe's last superhero survivor, Sue Storm. A tragic end for a tragic villain. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have Zombie Iron Man. When Earth 2149 was first hit by the zombie plague that's since been highlighted in multiple Marvel spin-off series, this version of Iron Man attempted to use teleportation technology to escape to a different universe with Nick Fury. However, a zombified Fantastic Four arrived too quickly for this plan, and Tony was bitten, becoming a living corpse inside his metal armor and developing a bloodlust and pure hunger for human flesh. Still surviving even after having his legs blasted off by the Silver Surfer, the zombified Iron Man would go on to lead the rest of the undead heroes and villains in an attack against Galactus and gain this universe's power cosmic, meaning he could now pursue more flesh throughout the entire universe and bring the zombie plague to the rest of the doomed cosmos.